Throughout history, kings have dealt with their enemies in all sorts of ways. For some, a quick execution was enough. For others, exile was the answer. Out of sight, out of mind. But then there were rulers who took things to a whole new level. They weren't just interested in ending a life. They wanted to crush a person's very soul. They invented punishments designed not just to kill, but to humiliate, to break, and to strike terror into the hearts of anyone who watched. These weren't just physical attacks. They were attacks on a person's honor, their identity, their dignity. In many cultures, losing your honor was a fate far worse than death itself. Imagine being stripped of your name, your family legacy, everything that made you who you are, while still being forced to live. This story is about those kings, the ones who wielded shame and psychological torment as their sharpest weapons. We'll explore the twisted creativity behind these punishments and see how they were used as powerful tools to maintain control. It wasn't just about making an example of one person. It was about sending a chilling message to an entire population. Defiance will cost you more than your life. It will cost you your very self. Let's start with ancient Rome. The Romans were masters of both engineering and brutality. While we often think of gladiatorial combat, one of their most feared punishments was something called damnatio memoriae, the damnation of memory. This was a sentence passed on traitors, disgraced emperors, and public enemies. It was a decree to erase someone from history. Imagine this. Your statues are torn down and smashed. Your name is chiseled off every public monument, every inscription, every building you ever commissioned. Your face is scrubbed from family portraits. Your laws are repealed. Your property seized. Legally, you never existed. Your own children would be forbidden from carrying your name. It was the ultimate act of social and historical cancellation. It was a way for the state to say, "You are so worthless. We are pretending you were never even born." The psychological impact on the victim's family, who had to live with this void, was immense. But humiliation wasn't just a Roman specialty. Let's travel to medieval Europe, a time of feudal lords and absolute monarchy. Here, public shaming was practically a form of entertainment. Stocks and pillories were common sights in town squares. People were locked in, their heads and hands bound, left to endure the jeers and ridicule of their neighbors. People would throw rotten food, mud, even animal waste at them. It wasn't just about discomfort. It was about social ostracism. You were literally put on display as a failure, a criminal, a laughingstock. For everyone you knew, the shame could follow a person and their family for generations, and some punishments were even more specific. In some parts of medieval France and England, for example, a dishonest baker could be tied to a sledge and dragged through the streets with the bad loaf of bread tied around his neck. A brewer who sold bad ale might be forced to drink a massive quantity of it and have the rest poured over his head. These punishments were theatrical, memorable, and deeply humiliating, linking the crime directly to the public shame. Now, why did these rulers go to such lengths? It was all about power. A simple execution shows you can take a life, but a punishment that destroys a person's dignity shows you can control their very identity. It was a form of psychological warfare against their own people. It demonstrated that the king's power wasn't just physical. It was absolute. He could not only end your life, but also erase your legacy and ruin your name forever. This is a side of history we don't often talk about. It's uncomfortable. It forces us to look at the darker aspects of power and human nature. But understanding these methods is crucial to understanding how rulers throughout history maintained their grip. It wasn't always with armies and swords. Sometimes, the most effective weapon was shame. These stories serve as a powerful reminder that the worst thing you can do to a person is always to kill them. Sometimes, it's to make them wish they were dead. The fear of humiliation, of being erased, of becoming a ghost in your own life. Knows the true power these kings held over their subjects. Ever wondered how ancient kings and medieval rulers managed to control vast populations with just a small army? It's a fascinating question. If you look at the numbers, it seems impossible. A king might have a few thousand soldiers, but he's ruling over hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, of people. If everyone decided to rise up at once, no army could stop them. So, what was the secret? The answer is a powerful, invisible force. Fear. Power back then wasn't just about swords and soldiers. It was about psychology. Rulers understood that they couldn't be everywhere at once. They couldn't physically force every single person to obey. Instead, they had to make people police themselves. And the most effective way to do that was to create a climate of fear so intense that the very thought of disobedience was terrifying. Think about it this way. Direct violence is costly and inefficient. If a king has to send soldiers to every village to enforce every law, he'll quickly run out of resources and manpower. It's much smarter to make an example of someone. This is where punishment became a form of communication, a public broadcast. When someone was caught breaking a law, especially something serious like treason or rebellion, their punishment wasn't a private affair. It was a public spectacle, designed for maximum horror and impact. These weren't quiet, quick executions. They were brutal, prolonged, and held in the town square where everyone could see. The goal wasn't just to punish the individual. It was to send a chilling message to every single person in the crowd. The message was simple. This is what happens when you defy authority. The sight of one person's suffering was enough to terrify thousands into submission. The memory of that public punishment would linger for weeks, months, even years. Parents would tell their children about it. It became a local legend, a cautionary tale. One body could effectively control an entire region without a single soldier having to draw their sword. This strategy was incredibly effective. It created a system where people were afraid not just of the king's army, but of the idea of the king's power. The fear was always present, lurking in the back of their minds. It made them hesitate before breaking a rule, think twice before speaking out against the ruler. They became their own jailers, trapped by the fear that had been so masterfully instilled in them. This wasn't just about cruelty for its own sake. From the ruler's perspective, it was a calculated and necessary tool for maintaining order and stability in a volatile world. They were using fear to prevent wider chaos and rebellion, which they believed would lead to far more death and destruction. It was a grim calculus, but it was the foundation upon which many ancient and medieval kingdoms were built. The king's authority didn't rest on the tip of every soldier's spear. It rested in the mind of every subject. By turning punishment into a spectacle, they magnified their power exponentially. It was a brutal, but brilliant, form of psychological control that allowed a small elite to rule over the masses for centuries. The real battlefield wasn't on the plains or at the castle walls. Ever wondered how ancient empires kept vast populations in check? It wasn't just about armies and walls. A powerful, terrifying tool was used. The fear of shame. Rulers knew that physical pain was a deterrent, but the threat of unbearable public humiliation could be even more effective. They weaponized shame to crush the very spirit of rebellion before it could even start. Imagine this. If you defied the empire, it wasn't just your life on the line. Your defeat would be turned into a public spectacle. The message was simple and brutal. Resistance is not just futile. It's the path to ultimate disgrace. This wasn't just about punishing the rebels. It was about sending a chilling message to everyone watching. Your failure would become a cautionary tale, a ghost story told to frighten future generations away from even thinking about dissent. This psychological warfare was incredibly sophisticated. Emperors and generals understood that people fear social death as much, if not more, than physical death. They would strip their enemies of dignity, parading them through cities, making them symbols of impotence. This created a powerful narrative. The empire is old, and to stand against it is to invite not a warrior's honorable end, but a lifetime of shame that would stain your name and your family's name forever. This strategy worked because it targeted a fundamental human fear. The fear of being ostracized, mocked, and forgotten as a failure. When potential rebels weighed the costs, they weren't just thinking about a battle. They were picturing their loved ones, seeing them in chains, their cause turned into a joke. The risk of such profound humiliation often became too great a price to pay, effectively neutralizing resistance from within. It was a cruel but brilliant method of control. This tactic of using shame and public disgrace wasn't unique to one empire. It was a common thread woven through the history of power, from ancient Rome to dynastic China. Rulers understood that controlling the story was just as important as winning the war. By defining what was honorable and what was shameful, they could control the actions of millions. It's a stark reminder that the most powerful chains are often not made of iron, but of fear and shame. It truly makes you rethink the nature of power and control. Have you ever wondered why ancient punishments were so public and often so brutal? It wasn't just about causing pain. It was a language, a very public statement designed to strip someone of everything they held dear. In many ancient cultures, from the Roman Empire to dynastic China, the body was more than just flesh and bone. It was a symbol of honor, strength, and identity. A healthy, intact body represented a person's standing in society, their family's reputation, and even their connection to the divine. So, when a ruler decided to punish someone, they weren't just attacking an individual. They were attacking their entire social existence. Think about punishments like branding, mutilation, or public flogging. A brand on the forehead marked someone as a thief or a runaway for life. Every person they met would see that mark and know their shame. It was a permanent stain on their character, a social death that often preceded their physical one. Cutting off a hand wasn't just about preventing a thief from stealing again. It was a visible declaration that this person had broken the community's trust. They were literally and figuratively handicapped in society. This concept extended beyond the individual. The shame wasn't just personal, it was familial. In societies where family lineage and honor were paramount, the disgrace of one member could tarnish the entire family for generations. A public execution or mutilation was a spectacle meant to humiliate the family, to show that their name was now associated with crime and dishonor. It was a powerful tool for social control. By attacking the body, rulers could effectively erase a person's reputation and bring a powerful family to its knees without necessarily starting a war. Consider the Roman practice of damnatio memoria, the condemnation of memory. After an emperor was overthrown or deemed a tyrant, the Senate could vote to have all his statues defaced, his name chiseled off inscriptions, and his image removed from coins. They were literally trying to erase him from history. By destroying his physical representations, they were destroying his legacy, his honor. It was the ultimate attack on a person's identity, ensuring they would be forgotten or remembered only in shame. These punishments were also a form of theater. They were performed in public squares, arenas, and marketplaces for everyone to see. This wasn't just for entertainment. It was a lesson. It was a raw display of power, a clear message from the authorities. This is what happens when you defy us. This is the price of dishonor. The fear it instilled was a powerful deterrent. The crowd wasn't just watching a punishment. They were witnessing the destruction of a person's social world. They saw a neighbor, a craftsman, or even a nobleman reduced to a symbol of shame. So the next time you read about these gruesome historical practices, remember that there was a deeper, more calculated logic at play. It was a brutal, but effective, system of communication. In a world where honor was currency and reputation was everything, an attack on the body was an attack on the soul of society itself. It was a chilling reminder that in the eyes of power, your very identity could be unmade, one scar at a time. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe for more dives into the fascinating and often dark side of history.